Mark, great to see you again, and I had the privilege of walking around the depot today and seeing, and it always amazes me how busy things are. Is a bit, could I describe it as sort of organised chaos? It feels like there's a lot going on, but it all seems to hold together pretty well.
Look, I think for the uninitiated observer coming in, it probably does look like chaos. But yeah, she's a pretty well-oiled machine, and you're dead right. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people come and go off this site every day. So yeah, welcome to the site. Good to have you here.
Yeah, it's amazing. We did this maybe sort of 4 or 5 years ago. We did a video, and I felt like we had to come back and do it again because so much has changed over that period. I know we've had little old COVID and a few other bits and pieces, but you've made a few acquisitions as well. So can you just remind us what the business looks like today versus maybe 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, sure. I think so the two big pieces that have changed really are adding that temperature control piece to the New Zealand landscape, and then in Australia adding Allied Express. So if you look at the business today, it's about 70% of the revenue comes from what we call express package. New Zealand couriers, post haste, sub 60, Allied Express. Around 10 to 12% comes from Big Chill, that temperature control with 3PL. Probably around 10% with information management, and about 8% of revenue with ShredX and MedX, so in that waste renewal piece. So the IM piece probably shrunk a little bit by proportion, just because of the growth we've had with Big Chill and Allied coming into the group. Right.
And with that change of a few of those other businesses, but even in the traditional express package, when I think about your business, I kind of think, stuff turns up to my house from a retailer, but what's the other stuff you're moving day to day? Because I imagine it's more than just online retail sales that's moving through your network.
Yeah, so the reality is through our business, 80% of it is business to business. Right. So if you think about brands like Toyota, and we've done the work for Toyota for probably 35 years now, those are all of the auto parts coming out of a DC in Palmerston North, going to every little branch and mechanic around the country, often at 6, 7, 8 a.m. in the morning. But the idea is to have those parts ready for when work starts. So a lot of that type of thing is what we've done for ages. That'll be pharmaceuticals into chemists or into hospitals. There'll be auto parts, there'll be machine parts, office supplies. Look, just about anything you can think about that travels in New Zealand, we are moving that around. So business to business is 80% of it. The piece that people think about with couriers is the online shopping piece. So that's the other 20%, obviously. And it has grown. I mean, it grew a hell of a lot through COVID. Our volume in B2C stepped up 50% in that 1 year. So it was a big challenge for the business to deal with it, but I think the team did really well. B2C products that we're handling typically higher value. So because we are that little bit more expensive than the competition, it's a good case of wine. It's consumer electronics. So those types of things that have a bit more intrinsic value being delivered to your home.
And thinking about all those different pieces of the puzzle, whether it's the consumer stuff, whether it's Toyota's parts, you've got a pretty good touch point of the economy, I think, and I still think you're one of the best barometers of what's going on in New Zealand. So how are you feeling about it? Do you have any sort of feel for how your customers are feeling? How are you seeing things out there at the moment?
Yeah, look, I think we have a really good feel for that. So you're right, we're pretty broad-based. I mean, clearly we don't do a huge amount in agriculture and mining and those sort of industries, and agriculture and farming and horticulture. Some of those are going pretty well at the moment. So, well, that's not a big part for us. We're across every other sector, be it government departments, wholesale to retail, manufacturing, etc. I think for us, 2.5 years of headwinds with a recession, so that's hurt our customers. Our customers have gone backwards year on half year.
This is sort of existing volume from existing customers.
That's right, So if you had an index of 100, they went from 100 to 95, from 95 to probably 91, 92. I think the nice thing is in the last 9 months or so, we've stopped peddling into the headwind. So the headwind stopped, there's no tailwind yet, but we're just sitting in this nice, fairly neutral environment. FY25 that we've just reported on fairly recently, first half of FY25, so pre-Christmas, same customer volume, still down ever so slightly. From January onwards, same customer volume up ever so slightly. So not much, less than 1%, but up nonetheless. So I think that gives us a little bit of confidence that we're not slipping back. And to be fair, on that Q2 GDP print, we didn't see customers really going back, even though that was quite a negative number for
Right,
GDP.
so your business wasn't as ugly as that data might suggest?
Yeah, no, it wasn't at all. So it was pretty steady, really, from January all the way through to June.
Yeah.
And then from July onwards, just a very slight uptick again. Nothing to get too carried away about, but yeah, a slight improvement again.
But with those interest rate cuts that we've seen, quite a few come through now, feels like we're probably at the end of that cycle, possibly a little bit more still to come. But that must slowly start, if we're thinking sort of into next year, I know sort of crystal ball gazing, but do you at least feel a little bit better about our prospects over the next 12 months than you'd have over the last 12 months?
Yeah, I think so. I think I stopped playing economist a little while ago, though, because it's been hard to pick, right? I mean, my general sense is that this recession wasn't deep and sharp, but it was a long, grinding slide down, and I think it'll be a long, grinding climb out of it. I think it'll only be as Kiwis feel a little bit more confident about their own balance sheets, and that might be as the value of the house gone up a bit, or have they put a bit more money into savings for any other shock that comes along. It's a cyclone, a pandemic, or anything else. So I just wonder if for Kiwis, maybe it's a little bit more confidence they need before they're spending much. We see it with Big Chill. Big Chill does a lot of deliveries into hospitality, and you can see how hard hospitality's had it over the last few years. And that's probably one of the first places when you have a few dollars and you're happy to spend, that you go back out for a meal and go to a bar and spend a little bit of money. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I know we never really like to let the Aussies get one over us, but you've got some businesses in Aussie, and it feels like they're doing a little bit better in terms of the economy, in terms of speeds versus us at the moment.
Yeah, look, I think Allied's doing a lot better in reality. Now, how much of that is the economy versus how much of that is being in a sweet spot in the niche that we're in? That's a little bit hard to tell. We're certainly not as broad-based, and we don't have the type of market share that we have in New Zealand with Allied Express. But the anecdotes in Australia are just so stark when you compare them to New Zealand. In Auckland on a Monday night, there's not many restaurants open, and if there are, there's only a few people in them. In a Sydney or a Melbourne or a Brisbane, you still got to book on a Monday night because it's busy. And so I think what we're seeing is consumers in Australia are spending money, buying stuff. The Allied brand's positioned in that big and bulky flat pack furniture space. So there's a lot of people buying flat pack furniture in Australia.
Doesn't bode well for tonight because we're filming this on a Monday night and we're hoping to go out for dinner, and you're telling me that
good luck.
It won't be very exciting in Auckland City tonight, which is a bit disappointing. You mentioned Allied a couple of times there, which is an acquisition you've made in Aussie. You've made a few acquisitions, Big Chill, Allied more recently, and you've got a pretty impressive track record. Touch on Allied if you like, but I'd like to kind of get your sense, because I suspect there's more acquisitions to come in your future, whether they're in the next 12 months or the next sort of 5 years. But what's the kind of must-haves when you're looking at acquisitions? What are the things that, as a bit of a showstopper for you guys that make you pretty good at these sorts of things? Yeah,
look, we're picky. We're absolutely picky. If I give you an idea, this year we've probably looked at 40 or 50 businesses. And we haven't bought any out of that 40 or 50. We're still engaged and we're talking to a number of them. But we are picky, absolutely, and we make no apologies for that. Finding a good cultural fit is really important for us. Finding a business that we can add to. So finding a business where some of the skills we have and the capabilities, where we can look and say, gee, if we overlay that on that business, we can help it grow. And I think Allied's been a great example of that particularly from a sales point of view, the sales model that we run here in New Zealand, we have applied that for Allied. And that has helped them grow market share, win new customers, retain customers they have, real focus on data and how do we give customers good insights, how do we give them really honest appraisals of how good or bad we are on a particular day. That stuff goes a long way. So those are things we've done here for a long time, and we don't often find those necessarily amongst some of those targets. So if we can overlay that on a target, help improve them and get a better return because we grow it after we've acquired it, that's pretty important to us. Usually, but not always, but usually we want it to be EPS accretive, so that's important for us, that it's making money, that we're not paying too high a multiple for it, we're getting it at the right price, so we're picky and a little bit stubborn on price too.
Investors will like hearing that, so...
Yeah, well look, we treat it like it's our money, right? So that's the mentality we have going into these things.
And you must learn a little bit from those acquisitions from time to time, or find something in those you can bring back to your existing businesses?
Yeah, look, we do. Yeah, and you're right. I think Freightways, probably prior to COVID, we had done around high 40s in terms of the number of businesses we'd acquired. So many of them very small. Many of them were small tuck-ins to existing businesses we had. But every single one you learn something. Yeah. Every one you learn something about the deal structure. What do you do after you've acquired the business? If you've got vendors remaining in, how do you manage that? So we've got both interests aligned. Yeah, there's a lot we have learned along the way.
And the bigger buckets, I guess, if we think about Aussie revenue, New Zealand revenue, it's probably 2/3 Kiwi, a third Aussie or so.
Yep.
Now, again, a bit of crystal ball gazing, but if it goes, if growth goes the way you want it to, how does that mix in the Freightways business look in 5-10 years' time? Is it still, are they growing at the same pace? Is one going to outpace the other? Is New Zealand kind of a market that's reasonably mature? Just interested in where the next lever of growth comes from.
Yeah, so for all of our businesses, we expect growth. And a really interesting example of that is DX Mail. Yes. DX Mail, you would think in the mail game, you're at the tail end of the life cycle. Well, the reality is that business is growing year on year. It's getting more efficient year on year. It's improving margins year on year. Now, that's what you wouldn't have thought would necessarily happen with an end-of-life cycle type service. So I guess the point is for every business, we have a growth path and we expect to grow. But I think within Australia, there are so many more opportunities that M&A is more likely to be focused over there. The markets are so much bigger. The pricing is generally higher because you're going longer distances. It's a big old country that you've got to get around. So the average revenue per item in Australia is far, far higher than what we would have over here in New Zealand. So for a number of those reasons, I would expect Australia to surpass New Zealand at some point in the next 5 years.
When I was walking around today, it was phenomenal to see the volume of parcels that is going through the business. How do you kind of manage that efficiently? And have you introduced a little bit more tech or a little bit more savvy into the business over the last 5 to 10 years to manage that volume growth?
Yeah, we have done. There's a few tricks and a few secrets to that, though. Right. So getting good density is the lifeblood of any transport business. If you have good density, you've got a chance of making money.
And on that, when we talk about that, it's just having enough parcels in a
run, in an area. Yep. Yeah, dead right. What's interesting is that we have around about 1,000 couriers in New Zealand. If you went back 5-6 years ago, we had about 1,000 couriers in New Zealand, right? The numbers haven't changed that much, but the volume of freight's probably gone up 30%. Yeah. And so you're dead right. What we're able to do is feed more and more into tighter and tighter areas usually. What you see is contractors will go from a small or a medium-sized van to a medium or a large van, so they can process more. We will provide satellite depots around places like Auckland to make sure that the contractor can be close to his customers and pick up and deliver and not have to spend too much time travelling. There's certainly a bit of tech we apply. So when we're thinking about do we add another depot or do we make a contractor travel further or in more congested traffic, we can use tech to help model that and understand what the impacts would be. And that's probably the most useful source for it. The best route optimisation for a contractor who does the same area 5 times every day is what goes on up here. There are just so many variables feeding into it. And we've tried with some of the best route optimization software you can get. And we haven't yet beaten the knowledge of a contractor who knows the area really well. Yeah. It's different if you're doing different areas every day. So certainly in some of the Aussie businesses and a business like Shredex where the driver's not doing the same area 5 times a day. We have used route optimization software there just to try and get a bit of an edge and get an efficiency gain, more bins per driver per day. So yeah, there's a mix, but a lot of the tech over here is modelling. What if we added another street for Mo? Could he cope with it all, or does it all get too much for him? Right. How much more can we get into your run? Can we talk to you about getting a bigger vehicle, which helps your earnings and helps our efficiency? Yeah.
Speaking of vehicles, are we getting into the EV van space yet? Is that something? If there's that many parcels to move in a day, can an EV van handle that yet?
Just getting there now. Yeah. So I think what we said probably 2 to 3 years ago was that the technology would eventually get there where it became viable, and we're just on that tip now. So we'll have about 16 EV vans up and running this side of Christmas through the various brands, typically in runs that are near depots, typically on relatively flat terrain. Typically where the guys are able to get a bit of a deal on a van, so it's not maybe the sticker price, but you can get a bit of a deal. But in those circumstances, it's starting to pay and it's starting to work. So that will accelerate. That'll absolutely accelerate over time as battery technology gets better.
Yeah, so still not mainstream, but we're starting to see
we're starting
the first
to see
signs of it.
Yeah.
It's probably EVs in general, really, isn't it?
Oh, I think so. Look, I think when we originally came out a couple of years ago and said, hey, this is what we think it looks like, we really thought they would start to happen in anger from 2027 onwards. So we're probably a couple of years earlier than we had predicted.
When you mention the sort of 80% business to business and 20% sort of business to the traditional parcel, surprises me a little bit. I thought that mix might be a bit different. Are we sort of slow in New Zealand in terms of the online shopping and structurally getting there, and do you see that as a bit of a tailwind for your business as we do more online and less with bricks and mortar over the next decade, 2 decades?
I think there's a few things. So as I said, back in COVID, we literally saw a 50% increase in the amount of B2C that we had, and it's really remained at that level.
Right.
If you drew a line between pre-COVID and where we are now, that's a CAGR of around about 7% year on year, but that's probably double what GDP would run at on average. So I think what you can say is, B2C is growing at twice the rate of B2B or GDP levels. The second thing you'd say is that for us, as the pricing becomes realistic, or where we can find customers prepared to pay the rate that we need to charge to reward a contractor and make a margin, then there's more of that market that becomes contestable for us. So really excited about that. And then the rate of penetration in New Zealand, look, it's probably about half what you'd find in the US or the UK.
Right.
Whether we get to those levels or not, I'm not sure. That's the Kiwi psyche. Do you like going out? Do you like going to a shopping mall and wandering around with social creatures? Do we get to the same level? But the reality is, our penetration's about 10 to 12%. Offshore can be, low 20% penetration.
It does feel like, regardless, it's moving that way. Like you
It's
say,
an
sort of
opportunity.
twice the rate of GDP growth is still.
Yeah.
That's still not bad to be on the coattails of, is it?
Oh, absolutely, And we have people now that spend a lot more time up in China looking at cross-border e-commerce opportunities.
Okay.
So we're winning customers direct up in China, up in Hong Kong, in these areas, and attracting them with a really high level of service, really good data, and it's bringing more items over the border for us.
Okay, so that's where you're winning as service, because I suspect you're not willing to ever walk back on price. You are the premium provider in the market. So is that where you win? You go, hey, look, if you want it delivered on time, a good, reliable service, and you want your end customers to have a good experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's just hard to understand why you'd bother going through all of the drama of B2C deliveries if you couldn't make $1 on it, right? They're challenging for a whole range of reasons. There's redeliveries, there's people that aren't home. The address quality is often not that great. Sometimes the packaging's terrible. There's a whole raft of issues you have in B2C that you don't have in B2B. So you've got to make sure you make an okay margin. And that's all we're after. How do we get an okay margin out of that sector? So we won't compromise on price. If they can't meet that price, we'll say, hey, come and see us next time.
Yeah. Your volumes you talked about have come down, sort of starting from that index of 100. We're sort of closer to 90 now, which is a reasonable hit.
Yeah.
The thing that probably hasn't come down or has gone the other way is costs. Over that same period. So, does it feel like we've turned a corner on costs as well? Because it feels like we're at the bottom in terms of demand, and we should hopefully get some lift with falling rates. But the other side of the equation that's important for you is where do your margins go and where do the costs go? So how does that feel in your part of the world?
Yeah, and two things there. I think what our teams have done really well and got to be applauded for is that they've won enough market share to offset those same customer declines. So that's kept us at a really good base level. So that's the first piece. From a cost point of view, the biggest cost we have is labour. We are a labour-intensive industry. There's not a whole lot of things that you can AI or automate out of the place just yet to reduce labour costs. So that's the biggest piece. For 2 years through those really tight labour market years, we had a lot of labour cost increases that were close to 10% year on year. And it was hard to capture all of that back in price. We had a good crack, but you couldn't quite get all of it. This year, labour increase around 3%. Really good availability. We have great waiting lists. So that's really the biggest cost piece we have. Things like energy for the big chill business, power prices have certainly gone up a lot, rates have gone up a lot. So the same things consumers feel at home we've experienced. Maybe a little bit of leeway for insurance this year. For the first time after Cyclone Gabriel and the costs there, insurance is probably flattening out. But yeah, good proxy for us is that labour cost of around 3% increase.
Yeah, and just thinking about kind of the new customer wins, you talked about, yes, the same volume from existing customers has been going down, but you have been able to offset that new customer wins. Any particular sectors or parts of the market that's coming from, or is it a bit of a mixed bag and you're winning all over the shop of it?
Yeah, look, it is a bit of a mixed bag. It's from a range of competitors. It's new businesses to market. So sometimes there are new companies that come up and they haven't got a provider and we're winning those. A little bit from offshore, as I mentioned. It's B2B and B2C in pretty equal proportion. So we're winning a share of both. Because our proportion of B2B and B2C has been 80-20 probably for 3 or 4 years now.
Right.
So it shows proportionally we're winning in both categories.
We've talked about that. We've spent a lot of time on the express package business, and it's kind of the glamorous, part, I suppose. But you've still got another business there in terms of information management, some of the destruction business. How can you give them a bit of airtime and how those are going as well? Because they're still an important part of the group, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. That information management business is really resilient through recession. So while they hurt a little bit through COVID, where you didn't have many people in offices, through recession, you generally are storing the same amount of data in warehouses and in digital format as you were pre or post recession. So that's been incredibly resilient. It's been a really important part for Freightways that the earnings for that division have stayed up and grown through that period where the courier companies have really had to fight for share. There's some really exciting things happening in there too. So our big growth has been in digitisation. Right. It's helping companies go from paper to digital. How do we help them with that journey? We might be storing documents for them. But what we're doing is helping them digitise records and sort of leap into the 21st century from that point of view, doing a lot of work in the medical and hospital industries over in Australia, as an example.
And are those projects, or is it just basically the wave of paper that's been sitting there, just trying to get on top of that and get those digital and easy to access? Because I imagine if you can, then AI, which is the buzzword of the day, becomes more powerful for some of those customers.
Yeah. A lot of the work we're doing is ongoing and new work. So if you think about some of the hospitals in Australia, what's happening when a patient comes in, they're still creating a paper record off the bat. Right. But what they want to do is digitise that immediately. Okay. And so that's our job, digitise that immediately and give them an electronic record of that. And then be able to link it up to a hard copy record of your medical file that might be sitting in one of our warehouses. So that type of work's ongoing. Some of it's historic, but they don't ever seem to destroy the boxes. So a lot of what you're digitising might be engineering drawings, might be city council plans, could be other government department files where the files are so valuable they won't be destroyed, but people want better and easier access to them. So there's a whole wave of that, and I think the next piece, you're dead right, is how can we add more value to what we have digitised, because we sit on an enormous amount of data, most of which is quite hard to access and actually get some value out of. And I think that's the piece that we're looking forward to finding the key thing that we can run over all of that data that we hold for customers and give them insights and provide value. Yeah.
The last thing I want to ask you, a little bit more boring, but always close to my heart, is just thinking about, you're a business that wants to grow. You want to potentially make more acquisitions. You want to grow organically. It all takes money. It all takes checkbooks.
Yes, yeah.
You still want to provide a stable dividend, and that's an attractive part of the offering that Freightways has. So how do you kind of balance all those things? There must be, you talked about the 50 businesses you looked at, there must be some great opportunities out there, and you want to take advantage of them at the right time. But you also want to reward investors with some reliable income streams. So how do you kind of balance the ledger on those things as a CEO?
Yeah, look, I think when you look at our dividend history over time, 22 years as a listed business, other than the GFC and one interim dividend in COVID, it's been a really steady and increasing dividend over years. So we've managed to do that. I think we have a bit of a flywheel, you know, and the flywheel is that these businesses do turn out a lot of cash. So we can acquire, we can take the earnings, we can grow, we can use that cash flow to bring down the gearing and control that debt, so that we can go again, and depending on the size of the cheque we have written, we can go again in a year or 2 years or 6 months, depending on where we're up to. We run a pretty transparent policy in and around gearing and where we want to be. And I think over the last 2 years, that's been a really good example that we were up near the top of the range after acquiring Allied. That is now coming down to near the bottom of the range. And so it positions us really well to use a bit of debt, come up, but because of that good cash flow, reduce it fairly quickly.
Actually, I'll ask you one more while I've got you, is just thinking about those 50 companies you're screening, and we hear a lot at the moment about business liquidations, and that's on the rise. Are you seeing that in some of your industries? I guess more so probably in Aussie. Are people approaching you with businesses, or is it you going out and scouting? Is it businesses you've kept an eye on for a long time? Just interested in if any of that dynamic has changed and people are looking to exit and had a tough time, and there might be some bargains out there, or is it just business as usual?
It's a bit of all of those things. So we have people knocking on our door. I think this year in particular, we've knocked on a lot more doors. So it's been quite a deliberate program to really get through the list that we have, get to meet these people, understand the business, put a tick next to it that we want to keep working with them, or put a cross and say it's not right. There were certainly a few on that list that, you know, we went and met one day, and a few weeks later they weren't around anymore. So there was a few, exactly as you've said, that had gone into liquidation and disappeared, shut the doors. I think it is a bit harder in Australia, even though their economy is still doing better than New Zealand's. It's not firing on the same number of cylinders that they would have done in the past. And I think some of those companies have lived on maybe surcharges and those types of things. As the price of fuel's come down, that's hurt their margins. So yeah, there's a range though over there.
And it feels like consumers were kind of, over the last few years, certainly I feel like our household, you were almost willing to give businesses a free pass for price increases because you saw the cost increases and all of that. But I think that's past now, hasn't it? And actually consumers are again a bit more savvy and wanting good service and not just willing to take another price rise year on year. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think a big part of that, though, is really helping them see the value in pricing. So we have a project coming up where we're investing $5 million this year and a few more million next year to give ourselves a billing and pricing system that allows us to be a lot more micro in the way we price. Because there's a huge amount of work we do for very, very little. You know, local deliveries, we're averaging $3 to $4. And if you try and travel across Auckland and think about you doing something for less than the price of a cup of coffee, that's just nuts. So we need to keep tweaking those things where, you know, they're kind of break-even propositions, maybe even loss-making propositions. So regardless of a great margin we can turn out in a business in express package, there's still pockets of pricing there which just aren't right. So I think those are the areas we need to tackle from a pricing point of view.
When you put it like that, $4 across Auckland is a little
cheap,
bit laughable, isn't it? That's amazing. I've actually got a parcel that's sitting somewhere in Auckland on its way to Tauranga, so I might even go and try and find it after this.
Good luck.
We'll see how we go in there. Hey, Mark, thanks so much as always. You're always very generous with your time, and we really appreciate it. And well done on another set of good results, and hopefully as we see things start to turn with the economy, you guys can benefit from that and keep going the way that you've been going.
Yeah, you're welcome, Mo.
Good stuff. Cheers.